The first thing Maris Duval noticed wasn't her son's voice. It was the way the kitchen seemed to shrink around it, like the trailer itself wanted to crawl backward off its cinder blocks and disappear into the Alabama dark. "I told you," Cade Mercer snapped, his words sharp enough to cut through the hiss of the frying pan. "I can win it back. I just need one more shot." Maris stood there with a dish towel twisted in her fist, knuckles white, staring at the boy she'd dragged through life like a canoe through mud. 22 years old now, tall and lean, shoulders too tense for someone who should have been thinking about graduation photos and job interviews. His hair was bleached near white, styled up like he'd stepped out of a music video. A small hoop earring flashed when he turned his head. Even the way he stood looked burrowed, chin up, eyes hard, like confidence you rent by the hour. Maris didn't care about the hair. She didn't care about the earring. Folks in Bayou La Batterie could gossip themselves hoarse about kids these days, and how city life changed them. Let them talk. A mother could handle talk. What she couldn't handle was the smell that rode his breath when he leaned in too close, cheap cigarette smoke and something sourly sweet she didn't want to name. What she couldn't handle was the way he said "one more" like it was a prayer. "You're not hearing me," she said, and her voice came out low, trembling at the edges. Not weak, just stretched thin. "Cade baby, you keep saying 'one more' like that's the bottom of it. Like you can just step off whenever you feel like it." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. It sounded like he was mocking somebody else's life. "You act like I'm robbing banks." "You refeeding a fire," Maris shut back. "And fires don't care what you meant to do." From the doorway, Eloane Mercer 15, all elbows and wary eyes, shifted her weight and clutched a plastic grocery bag like it was a shield. She'd walked in 5 minutes ago with 2 cans of soup and a loaf of bread, and now she stood there watching the air crackle between her mother and brother like lightning trapped indoors. "Dante," Eloane whispered, barely audible. Not a word so much as a plea. Cade didn't even look at her. His eyes stayed locked on Maris the way they did when he was a kid and he'd broken something and was daring her to punish him. "Do you know what it feels like," Cade said, slow and bitter, "to live here and know you're stuck? To go to school with kids who have trucks the moment they turn 16? To watch people your age take spring break trips and you're counting quarters for gas? Do you know what it feels like to walk into a room and already be labeled poor before you even open your mouth?" Maris swallowed. She did know. She'd been labeled poor since she could walk. She'd worn it like a second skin until it fused to her bones. "I didn't choose this for you," she said. "But you handed it to me," Cade fired back. He swept his hand around the kitchen, the peeling cabinet edges, the humming old fridge, the faded calendar stuck to the wall with a magnet shaped like a shrimp boat. "This is what you gave me. You gave me this life and you want me to be grateful for it." The sentence landed so heavy the whole trailer seemed to tilt. Maris felt her chest tighten, not like a dramatic clutch your heart moment, just a deep, slow pressure that made her take a careful breath. For a second she tasted salt, even though there wasn't a breeze in the kitchen. She'd had those moments more often lately, little warnings her body threw out like flares. She'd ignored them the way mothers ignore their own needs. There was always something else first. Always. Eloane's mouth trembled. Her eyes flicked to Maris's face like she was scanning for damage. Maris didn't move. She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she leaned both hands on the counter, steadying herself. "You want to know what I gave you?" she said quietly. "I gave you mornings when I went out before the sun and came back after it was gone. I gave you my hands, my back, my sleep. I gave you every dollar I could squeeze out of shrimp and ice and the dock. I gave you school clothes when mine had holes. I gave you a roof even when the wind tried to take it. And I gave you love, Cade. I gave you more love than I knew how to carry." Cade's jaw twitched. For a flash, Maris saw the kid he used to beta one who'd run up the dock barefoot, laughing, holding a little paper boat he'd folded out of homework he didn't want to do. The kid who'd promised her at 10 years old, dead serious, that he was going to make it big, so she wouldn't have to work anymore. But then Cade's face hardened again, like he'd shoved that kid back down somewhere dark. Love doesn't pay, he said.
Love doesn't fix anything.
Maris stared at him. And you think that does? She asked, nodding toward his phone on the table. The screen lit up again with another buzz, another message, another reminder that some invisible clock was counting down. Cade snatched the phone up like it had burned him.
It's nothing.
It's never nothing, Maris said, and now the anger in her voice was finally rising, not because she wanted to yell, but because she was terrified. I'm begging you.
I am not too proud to say it.
I'm begging you, Cade. Stop.
Whatever you got yourself into, stop now.
He took a step closer, his eyes bright with something wild and wounded. You don't get to tell me what to do. Maris held her ground, but her insides shook.
I am your mother.
And I'm tired of being your project, he snapped. Tired of being the reason you look at the world like it's out to get you. Tired of coming home and hearing how grateful I should be.
Tired of being ashamed.
That word ashamed hit Maris harder than any shouted insult. Because she'd seen that look in town. At the dock. At the little market by the highway. People staring at her worn shoes, her old car, her hands that never stopped smelling faintly of fish no matter how much soap she used. People looking past her like she was part of the scenery. She'd learned to live with it. But hearing it from Cade? That was different. That was a knife that knew exactly where to go. Eloan finally stepped into the kitchen, voice shaking. Cade, please.
Mama's been.
Maris shot her a look so quick and sharp it shut the sentence down. The last thing Maris wanted was Eloan saying out loud that Maris had been dizzy lately, that she'd been sitting down more, that her breathing sounded wrong after climbing the 3 steps to the porch. A mother doesn't let her kids carry her weakness. Not when they're already carrying too much. Cade's eyes flicked toward his sister, then back to Maris. See? He said, harsh. Even she knows. Knows what? Maris demanded, and her voice broke on the last word.
Cade hesitated just a fraction.
Then he said it anyway, like he wanted it to hurt as much as it did. She knows this is never going to change, he said. This place. This life. We're always going to be scraping. Always going to be behind. And you want me to keep living like that because it makes you feel what? Like your sacrifices meant something.
Maris' vision blurred for 1 second.
She blinked hard and forced it back. Leave, she said, and surprised herself with how steady it sounded. Cade scoffed.
Fine.
I will. He turned, grabbed his keys off the hook by the Duran old shrimp boat keychain clacking against the metal and headed for the porch. Eloan rushed forward, catching his sleeve. Cade, don't.
Not like this.
Cade yanked his arm back. Not violently, but coldly. Move. Eloan stumbled, her grocery bag tearing a little. A can rolled across the linoleum and clinked to a stop against the baseboard. Maris's entire body reacted before her mind did. Don't you talk to her like that, she said, stepping forward. Cade froze. For a moment, mother and son stared at each other, 2 people who loved each other so much it had turned into pain. Then Cade's mouth twisted into something like a grin, but emptier. You gonna hit me? He asked. Go ahead.
Make it official.
The perfect poor mom with the screw-up son. Maris's hand hovered in the air, not raised to strike him, raised because she didn't know what else to do with it. She wanted to pull him into her arms. She wanted to shake him. She wanted to rewind time and keep him 10 years old forever. She wanted to crawl into his chest and turn off whatever switch had flipped inside him. Instead, she lowered her hand slowly. "I'm tired," she said.
2 simple words. Not a dramatic speech. Not an accusation.
Just truth. Cade's eyes narrowed as if he couldn't stand the softness of it. "Yeah," he muttered, voice dripping with contempt. "So am I." He stepped out onto the porch. The screen door slammed, rattling in its frame. The trailer fell into a silence so thick Maris could hear the refrigerator hum and the distant buzz of mosquitoes outside the window.
Eloan's face crumpled. "Mama."
Maris kept staring at the door like she could will Cade back through it. Like a mother's willpower could rewrite a grown child's choices. "Go pick up the soup," Maris said, her voice quiet again. Eloan didn't move. He's not okay," she whispered. Maris's throat tightened. "Neither am I," she said, almost to herself. Then she took a slow breath and forced her hands to work because that's what they always did. She picked up the torn grocery bag, pressed it flat, smoothed it like you could smooth a life back into shape. Outside, Cade's car started. The engine coughed, then steadied. Gravel crunched under the tires as he backed out. Maris stepped to the narrow window by the sink and watched his tail lights vanish down the road toward the highway. For a few minutes, she stood there, unmoving, while the sky outside shifted from purple to black. She didn't realize she was shaking until Eloan's small hand touched her elbow. Did he mean what he said?" Eloan asked. Maris stared at the dark road. "He meant he's scared," she said. "And angry. And lost." Her voice dropped even lower. "But that doesn't stop it from hurting." Eloan swallowed. "Who keeps texting him?" Maris didn't answer. Because she already had a guess, and it made her stomach twist. 2 days ago, she'd noticed Cade pacing outside late at night, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in a tight voice that didn't sound like him. Last week, she'd found a folded slip of paper in the laundry numbers written in blocky handwriting and a name she didn't recognize.
Kellan.
And below it, Friday.
Dawn, play with me.
Maris hadn't said anything then. She'd told herself it was work, school, some harmless trouble. Anything but the thing her gut kept insisting on. Now, in the quiet, she heard something else, the faint squeak of the porch step.
A shadow crossed the thin curtain over the front window.
Maris's head lifted.
Another squeak.
Slow.
Deliberate. Eloan whispered, "Mama." Maris walked to the front door.
Each step felt heavier than it should have. She didn't look through the window, she didn't want to. Not yet. She reached for the deadbolt anyway, fingers hovering. Then the knock came. Not polite. Not quick. 3 heavy raps that shook the door in its frame. Eloan sucked in a breath behind her, sharp like a hiccup. Maris didn't open the door. She leaned in close, listening.
On the other side, a man's voice slid through the thin wood like a blade.
"Maris Duval," he said, like he'd known her forever. "We need to talk about your son." Morning in Bayou La Batterie never arrived politely. It didn't tiptoe in with birdsong and soft light like the postcards. It shoved the door open with salt wind and diesel fumes, with gulls screaming over the docks as shrimp boats rocked like tired animals waking up sore. Maris Duval was already up long before the sky changed color. She moved through the trailer like she'd done it 1,000 times, quiet, practiced, almost gently so she wouldn't wake Eloan too early. The old coffee maker gurgled like it was complaining about being alive. Maris poured a mug, didn't sit down to enjoy it, didn't even taste it the way people on TV tasted coffee. It was fuel. That was all. Outside, the air had that damp Gulf heaviness that clung to your clothes and your lungs. The porch boards creaked under her boots. Maris locked the door, checked it twice out of habit, then walked to her dented hatchback with a small cooler and a canvas bag that had once been bright blue but was now faded to the color of a storm cloud. Her hands looked older than her face. Not in a dramatic way, just in the honest way work marks you. Her knuckles were thick, her fingers rough, nails short because long nails didn't survive ice and rope and fish scales. The skin across her palms stayed slightly cracked no matter how much lotion she bought on clearance. She drove with the radio low, some local AM station talking about weather, tides, and a fundraiser fish fry at a church she'd never had time to attend. When she parked near the dock, she didn't have to look around for her spot. Everyone knew where Maris set up. Not because she was famous, but because she was consistent. Folks trusted consistency around here. She hauled her cooler onto a folding table and wrote prices on a piece of cardboard with a black marker that barely had any ink left. Shrimp $7 per lb. Crab claws ask. Fish today's catch. The handwriting was a little shaky these days. She told herself it was the humidity. It was easier than admitting her wrist sometimes ached for no reason. By the time the sun edged up, the dock started to breathe with life. Engines turning over, men in rubber boots calling to each other, someone laughing too loud, someone else coughing into the wind. The air smelled like brine and cold metal and ice melting too fast. Maris knew almost everyone by first name. Bayou La Batterie was that kind of place, small enough that you couldn't stay anonymous, big enough that you could still get lonely. Morning, Maris, called an older man with a wide face and a sunburn that never seemed to go away. Morning, Hank, she answered without looking up, already weighing shrimp on a battered scale. A woman in a floral hoodie stepped up next.
You got anything not gonna break my wallet today?
Maris gave her the kind of smile that hurt a little in the cheeks. If I had that, I'd be selling it to myself. They both chuckled, not because it was hilarious, but because humor was cheaper than despair. That was how Maris survived, by making the day feel normal even when the math never worked out. Because behind the dock banter and the quick transactions, her whole life was a quiet ledger in her head. Rent. Electricity. Eloan's school fees. Gas. Groceries. The cracked phone screen she kept saying she'd replace. The car insurance that always seemed to jump right when she managed to catch up. And then there was Cade. Cade Mercer had been her pride and her worry for so long she didn't know where one ended and the other began. He wasn't born Cade Mercer. His birth certificate said Cadence Elijah Mercer, because his father, God rest him, had insisted on a musical name. He'd said, laughing, if he's gonna grow up on the water, at least let him have something pretty in his name. Maris used to roll her eyes at that. She used to. His father had been Judson Mercer, a shrimp boat mechanic who could fix anything with the right tools and enough stubbornness. Most people in town called him Judd. A few called him Jude, like they were in a band. When Judd died, it didn't come with a dramatic soundtrack. It came like real tragedy often does, quiet, sudden, unfair. One day he was there, coming home with the smell of the bay in his hair. The next day he was gone, leaving behind a toolbox in the shed and a family that suddenly didn't have the centerpiece holding everything steady. Maris didn't talk about it much. Not because she didn't feel it, felt it so deeply it still startled her sometimes, but because if she stared too hard at that hole, she worried she'd fall into it and never climb back out. So she made rules.
Rule 1. Keep moving.
Rule 2. Keep the kids fed.
Rule 3. Don't let them see you break.
At first, survival looked like whatever she could grab. She cleaned motel rooms off the highway for a while, her knees aching from bending and scrubbing. She worked in a diner and learned the sharp kind of friendliness that got good tips. She collected aluminum cans with Eloan in a wagon, pretending it was a game even when her stomach burned with hunger and humiliation. Then one late summer, she talked her way into helping at a seafood stall. Not because she was charming. Maris wasn't a charmer, but because she was reliable. She showed up. She stayed late. She didn't steal. In a town where everyone had a cousin who borrowed money they never paid back, being honest was a kind of superpower. When the owner got sick and needed someone to cover more shifts, Maris said yes before she even heard the pay. That was the thing about being poor, you didn't get to be picky. Picky was for people with cushions. Within a year, people started calling it Maris's table, even though it wasn't really hers. She didn't correct them. It felt good to belong to something, even if it was just a folding table and a cooler full of shrimp. And Cade watched all of it. At 10, he'd sit on the porch steps with a cheap plastic keyboard someone had donated to the community center. Half the keys didn't work. Cade didn't care. He'd tap out little melodies anyway, humming like he had a whole band living inside his chest. At 13, he'd started making beats on an old laptop a neighbor gave him. The screen was scratched, the fan sounded like it was choking, but Cade treated it like treasure. He'd sit in the corner of the trailer with headphones on, eyes narrowed, fingers moving fast. Sometimes Maris would catch him smiling to himself like the music was telling him secrets. At 16, he'd played a song at a school talent night. It wasn't perfect, but it had something in Ethiart, hunger, a bright ache like he was trying to sing his way out of his own life. Maris remembered that night clearly. She remembered sitting in the auditorium and feeling her throat close up when she saw Cade under stage lights. For a few minutes, he didn't look like a kid from a trailer. He looked like possibility. Afterward, he'd run off stage and hugged her so hard she nearly lost her breath. "I'm gonna take care of you one day," he'd whispered into her shoulder. "You and Ellie. I promise." Maris had laughed, pressed her lips to his hair, and said the mother lie that mothers tell because it keeps everyone standing, "Baby, you already do." But as Cade got older, the world got louder. Other kids got cars from their parents. Cade got bus schedules. Other kids got a quiet desk at home. Cade got a kitchen table that doubled as everything, homework space, dinner spot, bill-paying station, and sometimes Maris's head resting place when she finally gave in to exhaustion. Other kids got to dream without calculating the price. Cade learned that dreams cost money. Then he learned something worse: dreams cost time. And time was the one thing Maris never had enough to give him. When he got into college near Mobile, it should have been pure celebration. In a way, it was. Maris cried in her car after the acceptance email because she didn't want him to see her looking weak. She pulled herself together before she walked inside, then hugged him and said, "You did it, Cade. You did it." He had smiled wide, boyish, almost relieved. Then he looked around the trailer, at the old couch with the duct-taped armrest, at the corner where the ceiling had stained from a leak during hurricane season, and something flickered in his eyes. "Yeah," he'd said. "I did." Maris caught the tone. She pretended she didn't. Before Cade left, she sold her wedding ring. Not because she wanted to. Not because she didn't love Judd's memory. She sold it because Cade needed textbooks, and Aloan needed new shoes, and the electric bill didn't care about grief. At the pawn shop, the man behind the counter looked at the ring like it was a math problem. "This ain't worth much," he'd said. Maris had stared at him so hard his eyes flicked away. "Then it's worth exactly what you're gonna pay me," she said. She walked out with cash in her pocket and a bare finger that felt colder than it should. That first semester, Cade tried to act like everything was fine. He called sometimes. He texted more often. He'd send photos of the campus brick buildings, trees, a library that looked like it belonged in a different universe than Bayou La Batterie. Maris would zoom in on the pictures like she could find safety in the pixels. He took classes that sounded respectable. Accounting, business systems, management basics. Words that made people nod approvingly if you said them in a room full of adults. But when he talked to Eloan because little sisters always got the truth first, his voice changed. Those classes are dry, he'd admit. It's like chewing cardboard. I swear, Ellie, I can feel my brain trying to escape.
What do you wanna do then?
Eloan would ask, her phone tucked under her blanket, whispering so Maris wouldn't hear. Cade would pause, and Eloan could always tell he was smiling.
Music.
Then he'd clear his throat and add, quieter, but don't tell Mama. She'll worry. Eloan didn't tell, not at first. Meanwhile, Cade started working, because of course he did. A coffee shop near campus. Late-night shifts stocking shelves at a grocery store. Weekend catering gigs where he wore a black apron and smiled until his face hurt. At first he sounded proud. I'm handling it, he'd say.
I'm not a kid.
Maris would bite her tongue and reply, I know you are.
Just eat something besides ramen, okay?
Ramen became a symbol in their family. If Cade said he'd eaten ramen, Maris heard, I'm barely getting by but I don't want you to feel guilty. If Eloan said she'd eaten ramen, Maris heard, we're still poor and you're still working too hard. Maris started doing double shifts at the dock and picking up extra side work cleaning an office building in Mobile once a week. The commute was brutal. The pay was insultingly small. She did it anyway, because she could send Cade a little extra money for books, and if he didn't have to stress so much, maybe he could stay focused. But stress has a way of leaking in through cracks, even if you patch them. Cade began to change in tiny ways so small Maris could have missed it if she wasn't his mother. He got quieter on calls. He stopped laughing the same. When he visited home, he looked around the trailer like he was measuring it against something invisible and losing patience with the result. That was when Dash Morrow showed back up in their orbit. Dashiell Dash Morrow wasn't from a wealthy family either. He'd grown up a few streets over. His mother worked at a nursing home. His dad was mostly a ghost with a name. Dash had learned early how to become useful so people wouldn't throw you away. He and Cade had been inseparable as kids. Two boys who dreamed big because their surroundings were small. They'd sit behind the bleachers in middle school scribbling lyrics in notebooks, pretending their cheap pens were microphones. Once, they'd promised each other they'd leave Bayou La Batterie together and come back like legends. Life didn't keep that promise. Dash took a different path: community college, then a steady job assisting a professor, then eventually a teaching track. He didn't make legend money, but he made reliable money. When he talked, there was still hope in his voice, but it was anchored to reality. Maris liked Dash because Dash looked people in the eye. Because he was respectful. Because he'd pick up a chair someone knocked over without being asked. Most importantly, Dash looked at Cade like he still saw the good in him. When Cade came home that summer with bleached hair and hoop earrings, Dash had been the one to pull him aside out near the shoreline, away from the gossiping neighbors and the heat trapped inside the trailer. Why you doing this? Dash asked, not judging, just trying to understand. Cade threw a pebble into the water.
Because I can.
That ain't an answer. Cade snorted. Maybe I'm tired of being invisible. Dash studied him.
You ein invisible, man.
Not to your mom. Cade didn't respond, and Dash knew he'd hit something tender.
Look, Dash said, softer, you want to be somebody?
Cool. But don't make your mom pay for the price of you proving it. Cade's shoulders tightened.
You sound like her.
Dash shrugged. Maybe she's right about some things. Cade's laugh was bitter. Easy for you. You got out clean. Dash's eyes hardened. No, I didn't. I just got out different. That conversation should have been the turning point. Instead, it became the first warning bell. Because not long after that, Cade met Kellen Rourke again. Kellen had been around when they were younger, a few grades ahead, always talking too big, always acting like he knew shortcuts. The kind of guy who could charm an adult into giving him a second chance, then vanish the moment responsibility showed up. Now Kellen was older, smoother, a little more polished. He didn't look like trouble the way he used to. Trouble rarely does when it learns how to dress itself. Maris didn't know Kellen personally, not really. She knew of him, the way small towns know of certain people. The way someone's name can carry a caution sign without anyone ever posting it. Cade didn't tell her he'd reconnected with Kellen. He told Eloane, once, by accident. Eloane had been scrolling on Cade's phone while he showered because she was 15 and nosy, and because siblings do that. A text preview popped up.
Kellan, Friday. You said you wanted out.
Then move. Eloane's stomach had dropped. When Cade came out, towel around his neck, she shoved the phone back at him like it was hot. "Who's Kellen?" she asked. Cade glanced at the screen, then shrugged too quickly. "Nobody." He tried to sound casual.
Don, TB weird.
Eloane didn't let it go. "That message sounds weird." Cade's eyes sharpened. "You shouldn't be going through my phone." Eloane felt her cheeks burn, but she stood her ground.
I am your sister. If you in trouble, I want to know.
Cade's face went blank in the way it did when he decided to lock a door inside himself. "I'm not in trouble," he said. "Go do your homework." Eloane backed off, but unease stayed lodged in her chest like a fishbone. And then there was Maris quietly getting more tired. At first, it looked like normal exhaustion. Who wouldn't be tired? She worked too much, slept too little, worried constantly. But some nights she'd sit at the kitchen table and massage her chest like she was trying to knead pain out of herself. Some mornings she'd pause halfway through pulling on her boots, breathing through a wave of dizziness, then stand up and pretend nothing happened. Eloane noticed. Eloane always noticed. "Mama," Eloane said once, hovering in the doorway, "you been to the clinic lately?" Maris kept her eyes on the sink, rinsing shrimp smell off her hands. "For what?"
Eloane hesitated.
You look pale sometimes." Maris turned the faucet off hard.
"Ain't nothing wrong with me."
"That's not what I said. I'm fine," Maris snapped, then immediately softened when she saw Eloane flinch.
Maris exhaled slowly. "I am just tired, honey.
That's all."
"Tired doesn't make you grab the counter like you gonna fall," Eloane whispered.
Maris stared at her daughter for a long second. Then she forced a smile. "Girl, I've been grabbing counters since before you were born. Go on." Eloane went on, but she didn't believe it. In late July, a thunderstorm rolled in so fast it felt like the sky had changed its mind. Rain hammered the trailer roof.
The power flickered.
Maris sat at the kitchen table, bills spread out, pen poised like a weapon, jaw clenched. Cade had called that night. Maris answered on the first ring, because mothers always do. "Hey, baby." There was a pause. Cade's breathing sounded tight, like he'd been running. "Mama," he said, voice low. You okay?" Maris stared at the bills and lied with a tenderness that would have broken anyone who didn't understand mothers. "Of course I'm okay. Why wouldn't I be?" Another pause, then, "Just checking." "You eating?" she asked immediately, because she couldn't help herself. "Yeah." "Real food?" "Yeah." Maris could hear the lie.
She let it slide anyway.
"How's school?" "It's fine." "How's work?" "It's fine." Maris tightened her grip on the phone. "Kat, talk to me." His voice shifted, defensive. I'm talking. No, you're surviving, Maris said. There's a difference.
Silence.
Then Cade said, almost too quietly, I'm gonna figure something out. Maris's skin prickled. What do you mean? I mean I'm not gonna let us stay like this forever, Cade said, and the way he said us sounded more like me.
I'm close, Mama.
I'm close to fixing it. Maris stared at the rain streaking the window. Fixing what? Cade didn't answer directly.
Just trust me.
Maris felt a coldness bloom in her gut.
Baby, don't do anything stupid.
I'm not, Cade snapped, too fast. Maris lowered her voice. Whatever someone is offering you, if it's fast money, it ain't clean money.
Cade's breath hitched. You always assume the worst. I assume reality, Maris said.
Reality is what I've been paying bills with.
Cade's voice rose.
I said I've got it. The thunder cracked like punctuation. Maris held the phone away from her ear for a second, stared at it, then brought it back. Her voice turned soft again, which somehow felt heavier. Cade, please. There was a long, awful silence where neither of them spoke. Finally, Cade said, I gotta go.
Cut.
He hung up. Maris sat there, phone in her hand, rain pounding the roof, and the feeling in her chest wasn't just fatigue anymore. It was dread. The kind that tastes metallic. The kind that makes you suddenly want to count doors and locks and exits. Eloan came in quietly. Was that him? Maris nodded. Eloan watched her mother's face. Something's wrong, she said. Maris tried to smile. It didn't quite work.
Nothing we can handle.
Eloan's eyes filled, but she blinked it back like she'd learned from Maris. Maris swallowed hard. Then we pull him back, she said. How? Maris stared at the bills, the pen, the tiny numbers that felt like chains. Like we always do, she whispered. With love. With truth. With whatever strength we've got left. Outside, the storm kept raging. Inside, Maris felt something in her life shifting, subtle, unstoppable, like a tide turning. And somewhere out there, in the humid southern night, Cade was walking closer to a door Maris didn't know how to lock. The email subject line looked harmless, almost cheerful, like it belonged to someone else's life. Congratulations. Audition slot confirmed. Cade Mercer stared at it on his cracked phone screen while he stood outside a coffee shop near campus, the Alabama heat already climbing like it had something to prove. For a full minute he didn't move. His apron was still tied around his waist from the morning shift. A smear of espresso grounds clung to his thumb. Cars rolled past on Airport Boulevard, windows down, music thumping, people acting like the world wasn't a tightrope. Inside Cade's chest, something flickered that felt dangerously close to hope. He should have been walking to his accounting internship. He should have been thinking about spreadsheets, expense reports, and supervisors who talked like every human emotion could be sorted into columns. That was the plan, the safe plan, Maris's plan, the plan that sounded respectable when you said it out loud. But the email wasn't respectable. It was tempting. It was reckless. It was the door back to the thing Cade had tried to bury without killing it. Music. He'd found the audition posting late one night after a shift, scrolling mindlessly because the quiet in his dorm room felt too loud. The ad wasn't from a huge label, not the shiny kind with billboards and celebrity names. It was for a training program run by a small entertainment company in Birmingham, a mix of vocal coaching, stage work, writing sessions, and performance showcases. Not exactly a boy band factory, not exactly a college club either.
Somewhere in between.
Cade had read the post 3 times, like rereading would make it more real. When he finally clicked the application link, his hands were shaking. That alone should have told him something, that he was starving for a life that felt like his. He'd filmed the audition clip in the stairwell of the dorm because it was the only place with half-decent acoustics. He'd kept his voice low, not wanting anyone to hear and laugh. He sang the way he used to sing at 16 in the school auditorium back home, like if he hit the right note, he might be allowed to leave his own body for a minute. When he finished recording, he didn't watch it again. He sent it and immediately regretted it, like he'd just confessed something shameful. Then days passed. Life kept grinding. Cade did his internship, smiled when he was supposed to, nodded through meetings that felt like slow suffocation. He worked mornings at the coffee shop. He tutored intro math at night when he could. He sent money to Eloan when he had extra. He avoided calling Maris too often, because every time he heard her voice he felt the weight of what she'd spent to get him here. And then the email arrived. Now, standing outside the coffee shop with his phone buzzing in his hand, Cade whispered to himself, "No way." A laugh almost escaped him. It didn't sound happy. It sounded scared. He walked behind the building where the dumpsters sat baking in the sun, where nobody would see him, and he let himself grin just for a second like a kid who'd found a secret passage. Then his grin faded as fast as it came, replaced by a familiar knot of guilt. Because he already knew he wasn't going to tell his mother. Maris Duval would hear audition, and think risk. She would hear training program, and think scam. She would hear entertainment company, and picture some predatory hustle that chewed up hopeful kids and spit them out. And maybe she'd be right. But Cade couldn't unfeel what the email did to him. It made his bones remember what they were built for. 2 days later, Cade took the Greyhound to Birmingham with a backpack that felt too light for the size of his fear. He wore the most serious outfit he owned: dark jeans, a plain button-down, clean sneakers. Not because he suddenly respected the business of music, but because he'd learned the hard way that adults responded better when poor kids looked presentable. The building wasn't glamorous. It was a converted office space tucked between a vape shop and a tax prep place, with a small sign that said Sable and Sons Creative in clean, modern letters. Cade almost laughed when he saw it. Sable and Sons. Like something out of an old Southern novel. Inside, the waiting area was packed with people his age, some dressed like they'd stepped out of a magazine, some dressed like they'd come straight from work like he had. The air smelled like perfume, sweat, hair product, and nerves. A woman at the desk handed him a clipboard without looking up. "Fill this out."
You, Cadence Mercer.
Cade, he corrected automatically. She finally glanced at him.
Cut.
Got it. He sat down between a guy with perfectly curled hair and a girl tapping her foot so fast the whole chair vibrated. Cade kept his head down and filled out the form. Name. Age. Voice range.
Performance experience.
When it asked for social media following, Cade almost left it blank. His follower count was embarrassing compared to people who looked like they'd been practicing being famous since middle school. He wrote it anyway, because lying felt like jinxing himself. Across the room, he noticed a tall, broad-shouldered kid with a lopsided grin talking to everyone like they were already friends. He had a soft southern drawl and a look in his eyes that said he'd been through something but didn't want to live there. That kid caught Cade watching and walked over. "You look like you're about to faint," the guy said, not unkindly. "You good?" Cade scoffed. "Do I look that? Man, we all look obvious."
The guy stuck out a hand.
"Name's Briar Wexler." Cade blinked.
Briar?
Like the plant. Briar grinned.
Like the mistake my mama made naming me.
"What's yours?"
Cat.
Cade, Briar repeated like he was testing the sound.
You from here? Down by the coast, Cade said. By Aula Batre.
Briar's eyebrows lifted. Seafood town. Yeah. Briar nodded as if that explained everything. Okay. That's why you got that look. Like you're used to workin', even when you're tired. Cade didn't know what to say to that. It felt too accurate. So he shrugged. Briar leaned closer, lowering his voice. You sing? Dance? Right. Cade hesitated.
Sing. Write a little.
Briar smiled like that was enough.
Good. Do it like you mean it. Don't do it like you asking permission.
Those words hit Cade in the chest harder than any pep talk. Before he could respond, a staff member called, Cadence Mercer? Cade stood, throat dry. Cade, he muttered again, but he followed anyway. The audition room was smaller than he expected, just a black floor, a mic stand, a speaker, and two people behind a table watching him like they'd already decided something. One of them was a woman with silver hair pulled tight and eyes that didn't waste time. The other was a man with an iPad and a bored expression that made Cade want to prove him wrong. Name? Silverhair asked.
Cade Mercer.
What are you doing for us today? Cade swallowed. An original. The bored man looked up. That got Cade's pulse to jump. He set his phone on the speaker connection, played the backing track he'd made on his battered laptop, and stepped up to the mic. His hands were shaking. He wrapped them lightly around the stand like it could anchor him. Then he closed his eyes. He didn't picture fame. He didn't picture lights or applause. He pictured his mother's hands cracked and strong counting small bills at the dock. He pictured Eloan's quiet face in the trailer doorway, trying not to beg him to be better because begging had never worked on him before. He sang like he was trying to be forgiven. When he finished, the room stayed quiet for a breath too long. Then the silver-haired woman said, again, "The hook." But this time didn't hide. Cade's stomach flipped. He played it again. Louder. Sharper. Less careful. When he finished, she nodded once. Thank you. That was all. Cade walked out feeling like his legs didn't belong to him. Briar was waiting in the hall and grabbed his shoulder. How'd it go? I don't know, Cade admitted.
I genuinely can tell. Briar laughed.
That's how you know you did it right. The acceptance came a week later. Not a full scholarship. Not a guarantee. But a slot in the program conditional on showing up, keeping up, and paying a monthly training fee that made Cade's mouth go dry. He stared at the number and felt reality slam back into his face. He could afford it for maybe 2 months if he stopped eating like a human and worked every shift he could grab. After that, he'd be swimming. Still, he said yes. Because when you're poor, you learn something early. The people who get out don't always get out by doing the safe thing. Sometimes you get out by grabbing a rope and bleeding through the climb. Cade's life turned into a juggling act that would have looked impressive if it didn't feel like drowning. He'd wake up at 5 for the coffee shop shift, sprint to campus, sit through classes that felt like someone had turned the world gray, then catch a ride to Birmingham for rehearsals on certain nights and weekends. He learned choreography until his calves cramped. He did vocal warm-ups in the car. He wrote lyrics on receipts during breaks. He started sleeping with his phone in his hand, terrified he'd miss an important message. In the studio, he felt alive.
Not happy alive.
There were other trainees, kids with rich parents who treated the program like a gap-year adventure, kids who'd been on talent shows, kids who had voices that made Cade's throat tighten with envy. But there were also kids like him, hungry and scared and stubborn. Briar became his closest friend in that room. The name was strange, but the loyalty wasn't. Briar was the kind of guy who'd hand you water without making you ask.
The kind of guy who crack a joke when your hands started shaking.
One night after a brutal rehearsal, Briar dropped onto the floor next to Cade and said, You ever notice how hope feels like a scam at first?
Kate laughed, breathless.
Yeah. Briar stared up at the ceiling.
Still better than numb.
Cade didn't answer, because it was too true. He didn't tell Maris. He didn't tell Eloan, either not fully. He hinted at extra work, projects, a new opportunity. He convinced himself he was protecting them from worrying. But in the quiet, he knew the truth. He wasn't protecting them. He was protecting the dream from being judged out loud. Then came the first crack in the fantasy. A trainee named Orson Valeskinny, nervous, always smiling too hard, started sitting alone after rehearsals, staring at his phone like he was waiting for a miracle. Cade didn't pay much attention until one night Orson approached him outside the building, eyes rimmed red. "Cade," Orson said, voice shaking, "I wouldn't ask if I had anyone else." Cade's gut tightened instantly. What happened? Orson swallowed. "My mom, she's in the hospital. Stroke, maybe. I don't even know. They're saying insurance won't cover everything. I'm short. He rubbed his face hard. I'm short like bad." Cade hesitated. He barely had enough for himself. "How much?" He asked anyway, because he was already doomed the moment he asked.
Orson's voice came out in a whisper. 3,000. $3,000.
To a kid with a trust fund, that was annoying. To Cade Mercer, it was the sum of entire seasons of sacrifice.
Cade pictured Maris selling her wedding ring.
Pictured Eloan bringing home 2 cans of soup like it was victory. He should have said no. Briar would have said no. Later Cade would realize that, but Cade had never been good at saying no to suffering. Not when it looked like his own. He nodded once. "Okay," he said, voice tight. I'll figure it out." Orson grabbed his hand like Cade had just saved his life.
"I swear to you, I'll pay you back.
2 months. I'll pick up more shifts.
I'll do anything."
Cade transferred the money the next day. The moment he did, his stomach turned, like his body already knew what his mind refused to accept. Orson disappeared. Not immediately. Not dramatically. Just slowly. He missed rehearsals. Then he stopped answering texts. Then his number went straight to voicemail. Cade asked staff if they had emergency contact info. They told him politely that they couldn't share private details. Cade tried to find Orson's social media. Deleted. Or deactivated. Or blocked. Cade's chest filled with a hot, humiliated rage that had nowhere to go. He cornered Briar in the hallway. "He's gone." Briar's eyes sharpened. "You loaned him money." Cade's silence answered. Briar exhaled slow through his nose.
"Man."
Cade felt his face burn. "Don't man me. I didn't." "You didn't think someone could do you like that," Briar finished quietly. "Yeah. I know." Cade swallowed hard. "I'm an idiot." Briar's voice softened. "You're not an idiot. You're just decent. And the world punishes decent people when it's in the mood." Cade looked away, jaw clenched so hard it ached. He didn't tell Maris. He couldn't. Because how could he explain that he'd finally found something that made him feel alive, and the first thing it did was steal from him? The second crack came as rumor. Late one night, after a showcase rehearsal, Cade and Briar sat on the curb outside the building, sweaty and exhausted, sharing a bag of vending machine chips like it was dinner. Briar stared at the parking lot lights and said, "You ever wonder why some folks barely practice but somehow keep getting pushed to the front?" Cade frowned. "What do you mean?" Briar hesitated. Then he leaned in, voice low. "There's talk. About pay-to-play." Cade laughed once, sharp. That's a movie." Briar didn't laugh back.
I'm telling you what I heard.
Cade's mouth went dry. From who? An older coach, Briar said.
Not here all the time.
Comes in, runs us hard, leaves. He said it like a warning. Cade stared at the ground. So what, this is rigged? Briar shrugged, but his eyes were serious. Maybe not fully. But money moves things.
Connections move things.
People with parents who can write checks, they get more patience. Cade's chest tightened. The dream started to feel like a hallway with invisible doors that only opened for certain people. Why are you telling me this? Cade asked, voice rough. Briar looked at him like the answer should have been obvious.
Because you, my friend.
And because you're the kind of guy who'll run himself into the ground thinking effort is all it takes. Cade swallowed. Isn't it? Briar's smile was sad. Effort matters.
It just ain't the only thing.
Cade felt something inside him go cold. He'd been killing himself to earn a chance. And there were people buying chances like they were concert tickets. For the first time since the audition email, he wondered if he was chasing another kind of lie. Then his phone rang. Not a text.
Not a casual ping.
A real call late at night, the kind of call that makes your whole body tense before you even answer. It was Eloan. Cade sat up in bed so fast his blanket slid off. Ellie? What's wrong? Her voice was shaky.
Dawn. Freak out.
That sentence made him freak out instantly. Tell me. Eloan swallowed hard. Mama's been not good. She didn't want me to say anything, but Cade, she almost fainted at the dock today. She said it was nothing, but... Cade's throat closed. Is she at the hospital?
No, Eloan whispered.
She refused. She said we can't afford it. Cade squeezed his eyes shut, a wave of helpless anger hitting him so hard he had to grip the bed frame. Put her on the phone.
She is asleep, Eloan said.
I didn't want to wake her. But she's been holding her chest sometimes, and Eloan's voice cracked. I'm scared. Cade's chest felt like it was filling with wet sand. I'm coming home, he said immediately. No, Eloan blurted. She'll lose it if she knows I called you. She said you have school and... Cade cut her off. Listen to me. Tomorrow morning, you're taking her to the clinic. I don't care. There was a pause. Eloan whispered, we don't have money for that. Cade stared into the dark and felt the walls of his life closing in.
Music program fee.
Rent. The money he'd loaned and lost. Tuition. Bills. And now his mother's health, something no amount of discipline could work around. I'll figure it out, he said, voice hoarse.
Eloan sniffed.
How? Cade didn't answer honestly. Because the truth was, he didn't know. When he hung up, he lay back down and stared at the ceiling until it blurred. He could hear Dash's voice in his head from that night at the shoreline. Don't make your mom pay for the price of you proving it. And he could hear Maris's voice too, like a ghost inside him. Fast money ain't clean money. Cade rolled onto his side, grabbed his phone, and scrolled through his contacts without thinking. He stopped on a name he hadn't touched in months.
Kellen Rourke.
Cade's thumb hovered. The last time Kellen had messaged him, it had been smug and simple. You want out? Then move. Cade told himself he was only calling to ask for a job lead.
Construction. Warehouse.
Anything. Honest work. But his body didn't believe him. His hand trembled slightly. He hit call anyway.
The ringtone buzzed once.
Twice. Kellen answered like he'd been waiting. Well, look who finally remembered my number, Kellen said, voice smooth as oil. What's up, Cadence? Cade's stomach turned at the old full name. It's Cade. Kellen chuckled. Sure it is. Talk. Cade stared at the ceiling and tried to keep his voice steady. I need money. Kellen didn't act surprised. He didn't ask why. He just said, quiet and pleased, how much? Cade swallowed. Enough to cover a clinic visit. Maybe more. My mom. Kellen hummed like he was listening to a song he liked. Family emergency. Yeah. That's always a good reason. Cade's jaw tightened. Do you know any work? Anything. I'll do shifts. Kellen cut him off gently, almost kindly. Cut. You don't need another minimum wage job. That's not a solution.
That's a slow death.
Cade felt his pulse spike. Then what? Kellen's voice lowered. You already know. Cade's mouth went dry.
No.
Kellen laughed softly, like Cade was being dramatic. Relax. I'm not saying you become some junky criminal. I'm saying you sit down, you play smart, you walk out with what you need.
Cade stared into the dark, heart hammering.
I can't. Kellen's tone shifted, still calm, but sharper now, like a hook sliding under skin. You can. You just don't want to admit you're desperate. Cade's fingers clenched around the phone. I'm not. Kellen didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. You just told me your mom needs help. You want her to suffer because you're scared to take a shortcut. Cade's throat tightened. He pictured Maris clutching the counter.
Pictured Elowen whispering, I am scared.
Kellen continued, voice smooth again.
One night, Kat. You win what you need, you walk. You go back to your little singing lessons, your little spreadsheets, whatever. You'll even feel like a hero.
Cade's eyes burned.
You don't know what you talking about.
Kellen exhaled like he was patient. I know you're calling me at midnight instead of your best friend. That tells me everything. Cade's stomach dropped because it was true. Dash would lecture him. Dash would ask questions. Dash would remind him of consequences. Kellen offered something simpler, relief. And relief was addictive. Cade swallowed hard. I need time. Kellen's chuckle was quiet, satisfied. Sure. Take time. But not too much. Time is expensive, remember? The call ended. Cade sat in the dark, phone still in his hand, sweat cooling on his skin. He told himself he wouldn't do it. He told himself he'd find another way. But deep down, in the part of him that still felt like that 16-year-old under stage lights, Cade knew the truth. When you're drowning, the hand that reaches for you doesn't always belong to someone who wants you saved. Sometimes it belongs to someone who wants you owned. And Cade, tired, frightened, cornered, had just let that hand touch him. Cade told himself it would be a transaction, not a transformation.
One night. One clean win.
Enough cash to get Maris into a clinic that wouldn't shrug at her because her insurance card was old or missing or complicated.
Enough to quiet Elowen's fear.
Enough to let Cade breathe again, just long enough to remember what breathing felt like. That was the story he repeated in his head as he drove north, hands tight on the steering wheel, headlights carving a narrow tunnel through Alabama darkness. He didn't tell Briar. He didn't tell Dash. He didn't tell anyone who might ask the one question Cade couldn't handle. Why are you doing this when you already know how it ends? Because Cade didn't want advice. He wanted relief.
And Kellen Rourke had promised relief the way a salesman promises a miracle smooth voice, no details, all confidence.
Kellen texted him an address that wasn't a real address, not exactly. A stretch of road behind a strip mall outside Birmingham. A place where GPS got uncertain and the streetlights felt spaced too far apart, like the city didn't want responsibility for what happened there. Cade parked near a row of delivery dumpsters and saw Kellen leaning against a black SUV, cigarette ember glowing in the dark. Kellen looked older than Cade remembered, still lean, still sharp, but the softness was gone. His clothes were clean and expensive in a casual way that made it feel intentional. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Cadence," Kellen said, like he enjoyed using the full name. Cade stepped out, jaw tight. "It's Cade."
Kellen's grin widened, amused. "Sure. Cat.
Whatever makes you feel like you're still in control." That line alone should have made Cade turn around and drive back to Mobile. It should have snapped him awake. Instead, Cade followed Kellen across cracked pavement to a side door behind a billiards hall. The front of the building looked normal: neon beer signs, a couple guys smoking on the sidewalk, muffled music through the walls. The side entrance looked like nothing. The kind of door you wouldn't notice if you weren't looking for it. No sign. No window. Just paint worn thin near the handle.
Kellen knocked in a pattern: quick, pause, one longer knock.
The door opened a few inches. A man with a thick neck looked Cade up and down with bored suspicion. He checked Cade's hands, his shoes, his face, as if deciding whether Cade brought trouble or was trouble. Kellen nodded at him like they'd known each other forever. "He's with me." The door opened wider. Warm air rolled out. The smell hit Cade immediately: stale smoke, cheap cologne, sweat, and something electrical. The hum of voices layered over the constant click of chips, the slap of cards, the small bursts of laughter that sounded too sharp to be real. Cade's heart started pounding.
Not excitement.
Not exactly.
A kind of animal alertness.
"Just keep your head," Kellen murmured, walking like he owned the hallway.
"Nobody here cares about your story.
They only care if you can pay." Cade swallowed. I'm not doing anything big." Kellen glanced at him, eyes glinting. "That's cute." They entered a back room with 3 tables running at once, all under dim yellow lights that made everything feel softer than it should. Men and women sat in tight circles, leaning in like secrets were being traded. A few faces looked too young, too polished, too confident. Some looked exhausted, like they were trying to win back a life they'd already lost. Cade's stomach tightened as a memory surfaced. His mother at the dock, counting bills, always counting, always measuring. Cade could almost hear her voice, low, tired, warning.
"Fast money, clean money."
He forced himself to keep walking. Kellen introduced him to a dealer with a lazy smile and a gold watch that screamed louder than any words. "This is Trey," Kellen said. "He'll take care of you." Trey didn't shake Cade's hand. He just slid a stack of chips toward him, not touching Cade directly, like physical contact wasn't part of the service. "How much you got?" Trey asked. Cade hesitated, then pulled out a folded envelope of cash, his savings, the money he'd scraped from too many shifts and too little sleep. It felt heavier than it was. Not because it was a lot. Because it represented hours he would never get back.
Trey counted without counting, eyes flicking, fingers moving fast.
"All right," Trey said. "Let's see what kind of night you're having."
Kellen leaned close.
"Don't get emotional," he whispered. "Emotional people are generous to the house." Cade's throat went dry.
"I am not emotional."
Kellen's smile was quiet and mean.
"Everybody is emotional.
The smart ones just pretend they aren't."
Kat zat.
The first hand was a blur. Cade barely understood what his body was doing. He'd played cards before, cheap games in dorm rooms, casual stuff, nothing that mattered. This felt different. The energy in the room pressed in from all sides. Every time chips moved across felt Cade's pulse jumped like it was attached to the money by a wire. He didn't think. He reacted. And somehow some ridiculous, impossible way won.
Not a fortune. Not a life-changing jackpot.
But enough to make the air in his lungs feel lighter. Enough to make his brain flare with that hot, irrational certainty.
See? I knew it. I am not stupid.
I can do this. He won again. And again. Small wins, but steady. A few hundred. Then another few hundred. The numbers stacked up in his head like proof of competence. Kellen watched him with mild interest, like he was watching a dog learn a trick. Cade's hands stopped trembling. He started to breathe. He thought of Eloan on the phone, voice cracking with fear. He thought of Maris gripping the counter like the room was spinning. Cade looked at his pile of chips and felt something like triumph. I can cash out, Cade said, almost to himself. Kellen's eyes slid to him. You could, he said. Or you could do what you came to do. I did, Cade insisted. This is enough for the clinic.
Kellen gave a small laugh.
Enough for a clinic. Enough for them to tell you she needs tests you can't afford. Enough for them to prescribe something that costs too much. Enough for you to leave with a pamphlet and a smile.
Kellen leaned closer, voice almost tender.
You want to walk out feeling like you helped or feeling like you fixed it? Cade's stomach turned. Because the truth was, Cade didn't just want to help. He wanted to erase the panic. He wanted to erase the shame. He wanted to be the hero of a story that had never given him a hero. He stared at the chips. I'm done, Cade said, but his voice didn't sound convinced. Kellen shrugged like he didn't care. Your call. Cade tried to stand. Then Trey the dealer said casually, You got a good streak, kid. The man to Cade's left snorted.
Streaks dawn, tea last.
The woman across the table smiled like she already knew Cade's next move. Let him ride it. Cade's body sat back down before his mind could finish arguing. Just one more hand, he told himself.
Just one more.
Then I'm out.
The next hand, Cade lost.
Not a huge loss. Just enough to sting.
The sting woke something in him, pride, maybe. A hunger to correct the universe.
A need to prove he deserved the earlier wins. He played again.
He lost again.
Now his chest tightened, that first familiar edge of panic creeping in. He played again, chasing. Another loss. Cade's mouth went dry. He could hear his own heartbeat louder than the room. He pushed chips forward anyway. Kellen's voice appeared near his ear like a serpent.
Don, tea break now.
Cade clenched his jaw. Shut up.
Kellen chuckled softly.
There he is. Cade won one hand, just barely, enough to keep hope alive. It felt like a life raft. Then like someone turned a key, the night shifted. The dealer's pace changed. The table energy changed. Cade couldn't explain it, but he felt it. Like he'd stepped into deeper water without noticing. He started losing faster. When his original chips thinned out, Trey slid more toward him without even asking. Cade stared at them. I'm not. Trey's smile didn't change. Marker.
Cade shook his head.
No, I'm cash only.
Kellen's hand landed lightly on Cade's shoulder, friendly, controlling. Cat, he murmured, Don, embarrass yourself.
Everybody uses a marker.
I am not everybody, Cade snapped.
Kellen's fingers tightened, just enough to hurt. No, he said softly.
You re the guy who called me at midnight.
Cade swallowed. He thought of Maris. Thought of the clinic. Thought of Eloan's voice. He took the chips. The second he took them, A quiet door closed behind him. He didn't hear it. But he felt it. The losses came in a slide, a smooth downhill that seemed impossible to stop. Cade kept telling himself he was one hand away from turning it around.
One good turn. One correction. One lucky break.
He wasn't playing cards anymore. He was bargaining with the universe. Hours later, Cade sat staring at an empty space where chips had been. His face felt numb. His limbs felt heavy. His mouth tasted like metal. Trey collected the last of the chips with a motion that looked gentle, almost polite.
Kellen pulled Cade up by the elbow.
Come on. Cade's legs barely worked. They walked him into a narrower hallway where the noise faded, replaced by a quiet that felt more dangerous than the chaos.
A different man waited there, older, broad in the shoulders, calm eyes.
He looked like someone who didn't need to raise his voice because the world already listened to him. Name? The man asked. Cade swallowed.
Cade Mercer.
The man nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already knew. You used a marker, he said. It wasn't a question. Cade's voice came out thin. I can pay. I just need time. The man looked at him like time was a funny concept.
Everybody needs time.
Kellen leaned against the wall, watching like this was entertainment. Cade's anger flared.
You set me up.
Kellen's eyebrows lifted. I didn't force you to sit down. You pushed.
Kellen's smile vanished.
I offered you a way. You took it.
Own your choices. The man with calm eyes spoke again.
You owe, he said, tapping a small notepad with the back of a pen.
Principal.
Plus juice. Cade's stomach dropped. How much? The man named the number like he was reading a weather report. Cade went cold. That's not I didn't. Cade's voice broke. That's not possible.
The man shrugged slightly.
It's possible. It's written. Cade's mouth opened, but no words came out. His brain scrambled, trying to invent money out of air. I can work, Cade said desperately.
ELLILL do anything.
The man's gaze didn't change. You'll pay.
That's what you LL do. Cade's hands shook.
If I can't. Kellen sighed like Cade was being exhausting. Don't do that, he warned. Don't say if.
The calm-eyed man stepped closer.
His voice stayed low, controlled.
We don't like drama.
We like payment. If you pay, we're strangers. If you don't, we become part of your life. Cade's throat tightened. You can't. The man cut him off with one sentence that made Cade's blood run colder than any threat.
We know where your mama sells shrimp. Cade's whole body locked.
The man said it almost kindly. Don't make us visit her. Kellen watched Cade's face and smiled again, small and satisfied. See? He whispered. Now you're focused. Cade lunged at Kellen before he could think. Pure rage, pure panic. Kellen moved faster than Cade expected, stepping aside while someone else grabbed Cade's arms from behind. Cade struggled, teeth clenched, breath ragged. The calm-eyed man didn't raise his voice. He just nodded once. Cade felt a sharp impact hard, controlled somewhere near his ribs. Not enough to break him, just enough to teach his body a lesson. Pain shot through him. Cade gasped and folded slightly, arms trapped. Easy, the calm-eyed man said. We're not animals.
We re-business.
Cade's vision blurred with tears he refused to let fall.
Kellen leaned close, voice like poison honey.
You're gonna pay, he murmured. Because you love your mom.
Because you don't want Ellie scared.
Because you're a good son. Cade hated him so much he could barely breathe. They released Cade and shoved a slip of paper into his hand: numbers, dates, a phone contact that wasn't a real name. 2 weeks, the calm-eyed man said. First payment. Cade's voice came out hoarse. I don't have. You will, the man replied, already turning away. Or you'll learn what part of your life means.
Cade drove back to Mobile like a ghost.
He kept his windows down because the inside of the car felt too tight, like the air was running out. Streetlights smeared across his vision. Every time his phone buzzed, his skin crawled. He didn't go to Briar. He didn't go to Dash. He went to the coffee shop at dawn and worked his shift with a smile that felt pasted on. His hands shook when he handed customers their cups. His ribs ached every time he inhaled too deep. During his break, he locked himself in the bathroom and lifted his shirt. A bruised bloom was spreading across his side, dark purple and angry. Cade stared at it, breathing hard, and his mind did the math in a brutal, simple line.
You can pay this.
That thought should have stopped him from doing anything else reckless. Instead, it pushed him right back to the worst habit of all, believing he could fix panic with a bigger risk. He began selling pieces of himself. Not literally just the small, precious things that kept him feeling human. The keyboard he'd saved for. Gone. A guitar pedal he loved. Gone. A laptop upgrade he'd planned for the program. Gone. He withdrew cash until his account looked like an empty cup. It wasn't enough. The calm-eyed man's words echoed, 2 weeks. Cade called Eloane that night and forced cheer into his voice. He told her he'd send money for Maris's clinic visit. He told her to insist, to push, to not let Maris brush it off. Eloane sounded relieved, and that relief nearly broke Cade. Are you okay? Eloane asked softly. Cade swallowed. Yeah, he lied. I'm fine. He didn't call Maris. Because if he heard her voice, he might confess. And confession wouldn't erase the debt. Confession would only crush her. So Cade did what desperate people do. He tried to borrow. He called Briar first, then hung up before it rang twice. He called classmates.
Voicemail.
Read receipts. Excuses that sounded like polite doors shutting. Finally, in a moment of shaking anger, he called Dash Morrow because if anyone had money, if anyone could help, it would be Dash. Dash answered with surprise in his voice. Kat? You good? Cade leaned against the dorm wall, eyes closed.
I need a favor.
Dash went quiet.
What kind of favor?
Money, Cade said, hating himself as he said it. Just a loan.
I'll pay you back.
Dash didn't answer immediately, which somehow felt worse than a no. Then Dash said carefully, Cade, what did you get into? Cade's throat tightened. Just help me. Dash's voice hardened. If this is gambling. It's not. Cade started then stopped, because it was. Because Dash would hear it anyway in the way Cade's voice cracked.
Dash exhaled slowly.
Man, he said, pained.
Tell me the truth.
Cade couldn't. He wouldn't. He told Dash a smaller story: medical emergency, bad timing, promise to repay. He left out the marker.
Left out Kellen. Left out the bruises.
Left out the threat that had made Cade's blood freeze. We know where your mama sells shrimp. Dash was quiet for a long moment. Then, because Dash still had a good heart, he said, I can send something. But Cadet, his is the last time I help you without answers.
Cade's eyes stung.
Thank you. Don't thank me, Dash snapped. Fix it. Cade hung up and felt shame crawl over his skin like ants. He got the transfer. Not enough to erase the debt, but enough to make him think he could patch it, delay it, stall the inevitable. And that was the danger of small relief. It makes you believe the cliff edge is farther away than it is. The next week, Cade returned to the back room. He told himself it was to win enough to pay the first chunk, then walk away. But the moment he sat down and heard the chips click, his brain started lying again. He won early just enough. Hope returned, bright and stupid. Then the table turned. The losses came fast, ruthless, like the room had decided it was done being patient. Cade pushed forward. Chased. Sweated. Bluffed with hands he didn't even understand. By the end of the night, Cade walked out with more debt than he started with. Kellen met him outside, cigarette glowing in the dark like an evil little star. Kellen's voice was calm. You panicked. Cade's hands clenched.
You wanted me to. Kellan shrugged. I want you to grow up. Cade stepped close, breath shaking. Leave my family out of it. Kellen smiled, cold.
Then pay. Cade drove home to Bayou La Batterie the next day without warning, not because he wanted to see them, because he needed to make sure they were still safe. Maris opened the door and stared at his face like she was reading a terrible letter. What happened to you? She asked, voice tight. Cade swallowed. Work accident.
Maris' eyes narrowed.
She didn't believe him. Not for a second. Eloan hovered behind her, pale and silent, watching her brother the way you watch a storm cloud you can't outrun. Maris lowered her voice.
Cade, what did you do?
Cade looked away. Nothing.
Maris' Jav trembled.
That's a lie. He didn't answer. Because the truth was too big to fit inside their little kitchen. Because the truth had claws. That night, long after Cade pretended to fall asleep on the couch, Maris sat at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking. She stared into the darkness as if she could see the future hiding there.
Eloan whispered, Mama.
Maris held up a hand. Go to bed. Eloan didn't move. Those texts. Maris's voice cracked, sharp with fear she couldn't control.
Go to bed, Ellie.
Eloan flinched, then obeyed. Maris stayed at the table, listening to the trailer creak and settle.
Listening to Cade's breathing on the couchoneven, haunted.
Listening to her own heart thud too hard in her chest. Then she heard it.
The porch step. A slow squeak.
Then another. Maris didn't move. She couldn't.
A shadow crossed the thin curtain.
Someone stood close enough to block the porch light. And then came the knock, heavy, deliberate, like the door belonged to them already. Maris rose so slowly it felt like the air itself resisted her. She reached for the deadbolt, fingers hovering, not turning it yet.
A voice, calm and sure, slid through the thin wood. Ms.
Duval, the voice said, we're here about your son. Maris Duval didn't open the door right away. She stood with her palm flat against the deadbolt, listening, really listening the way women learn to listen when they've lived too long in houses where bad news shows up uninvited. The trailer was quiet except for the faint whir of the ceiling fan and Cade's uneven breathing on the couch behind her. Outside, the porch light hummed and insects threw themselves at it like the glow was a promise.
The knock came again.
Not frantic. Not angry. Controlled. The kind of knock that said whoever was out there wasn't worried about being ignored.
Ms.
Duval, the voice repeated, polite enough to feel like a threat in a tuxedo. We can do this easy or we can do it loud. Maris swallowed. Her throat felt dry, like she'd swallowed sand. She turned her head slightly, just enough to glance back at Cade's silhouette on the couch. He lay curled on his side, one arm bent under his head like a child, but there was nothing childlike about the tension in his body. Even asleep, he looked like he was bracing for impact. Maris's heart did a slow, painful twist. Whatever Cade had done, whatever he was hiding, it had followed him home. It had found their porch. It knew her name. She did what she always did when the world tried to shove her down. She straightened her spine and made her face hard. Then she unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door just enough to fill the crack with her body. A man stood on the porch, hands in his jacket pockets like he was waiting for a table at a restaurant. He was older than Cade, mid-30s, maybe early 40s, clean cut, calm eyes, hair trimmed neat.
Not a tattooed monster.
Not the caricature people pictured when they imagined bad guys. That was the scariest kind. Behind him, half a step back, hovered a second figure, bulkier, wearing a cap pulled low, face mostly shadow. He didn't speak. He just watched. The calm man smiled as if they'd met at a church picnic. Evening.
Sorry to bother you.
It's midnight, Maris said flatly. I don't keep banker hours, the man replied, tone gentle.
Name's Wade Calder. I'm here about Cade Mercer.
Maris didn't flinch. He's asleep. Wade's eyes moved past her shoulder, scanning the living room in one clean sweep. Maris hated how easily his gaze traveled inside her home. Like walls were suggestions. Then wake him, Wade said, still polite.
We don't like waiting. Maris's fingers tightened on the door edge.
You don't get to come here and... Wade's smile thinned.
Ms.
Duval, I know you've worked hard.
You a respected woman around here.
You sell seafood.
Folks know you. Folks wave to you.
His voice softened, almost sympathetic. It would be a shame if folks started asking why men like me come knocking at your door after midnight. Maris felt heat rise behind her eyes.
Not Tiersanger.
You can leave, she said. Right now. Wade tilted his head like he was considering it, like he had choices. Then he nodded once toward the shadowed man behind him. The second man took one step closer, just enough for Maris to see his hands' big, scarred knuckles. Wade spoke quietly, as if sharing a secret.
Cade used a marker. Cade lost. Cade promised a payment date.
Maris's stomach dropped, but she kept her face still. I don't know what that means. Wade's eyes sharpened, the politeness peeling back.
It means your son owes money.
It means your son is late. It means I'm here because I prefer talking to mamas before I start talking to sons. Maris's voice came out low. He doesn't have money. Wade nodded like he already knew. That's why we're here. We're not here for drama. We're here for a plan.
Maris could feel the trailer behind her, every cheap, familiar thing in it suddenly fragile.
Like the whole home was made of thin cardboard and one hard shove would collapse it. She forced herself to say, what kind of plan? Wade's smile returned, careful.
One where Cade calls me tomorrow morning.
One where he makes a first payment, something to show effort. One where I don't have to come back. Maris's jaw clenched. And if he can't? Wade's eyes went cold. I'm not a violent man, he said. I pay my people.
I keep my word.
I like calm. He leaned forward slightly, voice lowering, sharp enough to cut. But if Cade plays games, Ms. Duval, I can't control what happens around him. Accidents happen. Tires go flat.
Windows get broken.
People get scared. He let that hang in the air. Then, like a man showing manners, Wade stepped back. Wake him.
Just for a minute. Maris hesitated.
She didn't want Cade to see these men on their porch. She didn't want Aloan to wake up and hear a voice she'd never forget. But she also didn't want to test how far calm men would go when they stopped being calm. So she opened the door wider and turned without a word. Cade, she hissed, crossing the living room in 2 steps. "Cade, wake up." Cade stirred, blinking like he'd been yanked from a nightmare. His eyes landed on Maris's face, then shifted past her shoulder toward the open door, and the moment he saw Wade, all the color drained from his expression. Cade sat up fast, pain flashing across his face as his bruised ribs protested. "No," he breathed, barely audible.
"No, no."
Maris grabbed his wrist, not gently. "Get up," she said through clenched teeth.
"Now."
Cade rose and moved toward the door like his body was on autopilot. He stopped just inside the threshold, shoulders tense, fists clenched at his sides. Wade smiled at him like an old friend.
"Cade Mercer. There you are." Cade's voice shook.
"You shouldn't be here." Wade nodded thoughtfully. "And you shouldn't be late." Maris's eyes darted between them. She could feel her heart pounding in her throat. "Cade," she said, voice cracking, "what is this?" Cade didn't look at her. He couldn't. He swallowed. "It's nothing."
Wade chuckled softly. "It's not nothing.
It's a lot of money."
Maris's hands trembled.
"Cut." Cade's voice went raw.
"Mama, go inside."
Maris stared at him.
"Don't you tell me to go inside in my own house."
Wade watched the family fracture in real time with the calm interest of someone watching weather. "Here's what's going to happen," Wade said, addressing Cade, but his eyes stayed on Maris like she was the real pressure point. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m. You call.
You pay something.
If you don't, we'll have another talk."
Cade's breath came fast.
"I don't have it."
Wade's smile faded.
"Then you better find it."
Cade's eyes flashed. "You set me up."
Wade's gaze didn't move. "Nobody forced you to sit at a table." Cade's jaw clenched. "You used my..." Wade's voice snapped, suddenly sharp and flat.
"Don't talk about your mama like that."
That sentence hit Maris like a slap because it confirmed what she already feared. These men had targeted Cade through his love for her. And Cade, her boy, her stubborn, beautiful boy, had let them. Maris felt something in her chest, flareage and grief tangled together so tight she couldn't separate them. "You leave," Maris said, stepping forward until she was beside Cade. "You get off my porch." Wade looked at her, calm again.
"Ms. Duval, you brave."
"But bravery doesn't pay debt." Then he leaned toward Cade, voice low. 2 days, Wade murmured, changing the terms like he was flicking a knife open. "Not 2 weeks.
You past due. You think I am here for fun."
Cade flinched, and that flinch was all the shadowed man needed. The second man stepped forward and shoved Cade hard enough to slam him into the door frame. Maris gasped. "Hey." Cade grunted, pain ripping through him. His hands shot out instinctively, but Wade lifted one palm, and the shadowed man stopped just like that. Wade's expression stayed bored.
"This is the part where you decide what kind of son you want to be," Wade said softly.
"The kind who handles his mess or the kind who makes me return?"
Maris's vision blurred for a second.
She wasn't sure if it was tears or fury. "You touch him again," she said, voice shaking, "and I swear to God I'll call the sheriff." Wade smiled small. "Go ahead. I'm sure the sheriff loves paperwork. I'm sure he'll protect you at 3 in the morning." He stepped back from the porch and tugged his jacket cuff like he was preparing to leave a business meeting. 2 days, he repeated, voice calm as a lullaby.
"Don't make me introduce myself to your neighbors."
Then Wade turned and walked into the darkness with the shadowed man behind him, their footsteps fading like the trailer itself exhaled. Maris stood frozen in the doorway long after they were gone. Cade's breathing sounded ragged, like he was trying to swallow a scream. Finally Maris shut the door, slid the deadbolt, and turned around slowly.
Her eyes met Kate's.
And whatever love lived there, there was love. God help them, was now wrapped in something sharper. "What," she said, each word heavy, "did you do?" Cade opened his mouth. Closed it. Maris stepped forward and, for the first time in Cade's whole life, she didn't soften for his silence. "You brought strangers to my porch," she whispered, voice trembling. "You brought danger to your sister's bed." Cade's eyes filled, but he wiped them harshly like he didn't deserve tears. "I didn't want to," he croaked. "I tried." "Don't," Maris snapped. "Don't give me the tried. I didn't try to feed you. I didn't try to keep you in school. I did it." Cade flinched like she'd struck him. Maris lowered her voice, shaking. "How much?" Cade stared at the floor. His shoulders rose and fell. When he finally answered, the number came out like a confession at the edge of a cliff. Maris went still. It wasn't just a lot. It was impossible. For a moment, neither of them moved. The trailer felt too small for the truth.
From the hallway, a soft sound, bare feet on cheap linoleum.
Eloan stood there, pale as paper, hair messy from sleep. Her eyes were wide and shining. "Mama," she whispered, voice cracking. "Who was that?" Maris turned toward her daughter and felt her throat close. She wanted to lie. She wanted to say it was nothing. She wanted to protect Eloan the way she'd always tried to protect her kids, by swallowing fear whole. But Eloan had heard the knock. The voices. The threat that lived between the words. Maris forced herself to breathe. "Go back to bed," Maris said, softer now, because she couldn't bear hurting Eloan too. "Please." Eloan didn't move. Her gaze slid to Cade.
"Is it because of you?"
Cade looked like he wanted the floor to open and take him.
"Eloan," Cade whispered, "I am sorry." Eloan's face crumpled.
"You said you were fine." Cade swallowed. "I lied." Eloan backed up one step, as if lying was a physical thing that had shoved her. "Why?" she whispered.
Cade's voice broke.
"Because I thought I could fix it." Maris shut her eyes for a second, overwhelmed by a wave of exhaustion so deep it felt like the sea pulling her under. When she opened them again, she made a decision so fast it felt like instinct. "Cade," she said quietly, "you're going to sit." He obeyed, collapsing onto the couch like his bones couldn't argue. Maris looked at Eloan. "You," she said gently, back to bed.
"Lock your door."
Eloan hesitated, eyes glossy.
"Mama."
"Now," Maris said, and it wasn't anger. It was fear sharpened into command.
Eloan disappeared down the hall.
Maris waited until she heard the bedroom door click. Then she turned back to Cade. Her voice was low and deadly steady. "This ends," she said.
"One way or another."
Cade's eyes filled again. "How?" Maris stared at him, really stared, like she was trying to find her son under the wreckage. "I don't know yet," she whispered. "But I'm not letting men like that circle my home." Cade shook his head, panicked.
"Mama, no, don't talk like that. Don't do anything crazy."
Maris let out a bitter laugh that sounded like it scraped her throat. "Crazy?" she repeated.
"You want to talk about crazy?"
Then her face softened, just a fraction, and the softness was worse because it meant love still lived here.
"I am your mother," she said, voice shaking.
"I can't watch you get swallowed."
Cade's breathing hitched.
"I don't deserve." "You don't get to decide what you deserve," Maris snapped.
"You get to decide what you do next."
Cade stared at his hands, fists opening and closing like he was trying to crush invisible guilt. I can fix it, he whispered. I can work. I can. 2 days, Maris said. 2 days isn't work.
It is a countdown.
Cade's voice turned frantic. They'll hurt you. Maris swallowed hard. Not if I get ahead of it. Cade's eyes widened in horror. What do you mean? Maris didn't answer. Because saying it out loud would make it real. She went to the small drawer where she kept papers, bills, receipts, important documents folded into neat stacks because neat stacks were the only thing in her life she could control. Her fingers trembled as she pulled out an envelope labeled in her handwriting.
Beckgarden Lot dit Copy. Judsens Note.
She stared at the paper until the words blurred. Judson's note was old, written on lined paper, the handwriting that used to feel like home.
Maris, if anything happens to me, don't sell the back lot.
It's Ellie's start. Keep it safe. Maris pressed her thumb against the paper so hard it almost tore. Her chest tightened again, pain, dizziness, the familiar warning her body had been trying to whisper for weeks. She breathed through it. Forced it down. Because there wasn't room for her body's weakness right now. She folded the note and put it back. Then she took the deed copy and slid it into her purse. Cade watched her, eyes terrified.
Mama.
No.
Don't do that.
Maris didn't look at him. Go back to sleep, she said quietly.
I can sleep, Cade whispered.
Maris finally turned, eyes blazing. Then watch, she said, voice breaking. Watch what your mother has to do when her son invites wolves to her porch. Cade stood abruptly, wincing, desperation rising.
Ill Koldash. Il Kolbreyer.
I'll. Maris cut him off with one cold sentence. You already did. Cade froze. Maris's gaze didn't soften. And it wasn't enough. Silence swallowed the room. Finally Cade's shoulders sagged. I'm sorry, he whispered again, like the phrase could rebuild everything. Maris looked away because if she stared at him too long, she might collapse. Sorry doesn't scare men like that off, she murmured. Money does. The next morning, Maris drove to the credit union in Mobile with the sun barely up and her stomach knotted so tight she felt sick. Cade begged to go with her. Maris refused. Eloan begged too, tears threatening. Maris kissed her forehead and told her to stay home, lock the door, and call Dash if anything felt wrong. Maris walked into the credit union smelling faintly of fish and bleach cleaner and exhaustion. She wore her best shirt still worn, still faded but clean. She held her purse like armor. A young loan officer with a neat bun and kind eyes asked, "How can I help you today, ma'am?" Maris heard her own voice reply, calm and steady, like it belonged to someone else.
I need a personal loan.
The loan officer asked questions. Income. Assets. Credit history. Maris answered honestly, and honesty sounded humiliating in that air-conditioned office. The loan officer's face tightened in sympathy.
Ms.
Duval, the amount you're asking for. I have collateral, Maris interrupted quickly, sliding the deed copy forward like it was a hostage she was handing over. My backlot. The loan officer blinked. You own property? Maris nodded, throat tight.
My husband left it.
She swallowed.
It is all I've got.
The loan officer studied the paper, then looked up. And this is urgent.
Maris' lips pressed together.
Yes. The loan officer hesitated, then softened her voice. Is someone threatening you? Maris's heart pounded. She could have told the truth right then. She could have said yes. She could have asked for help. But the calm-eyed man's voice echoed in her mind. Go ahead. I'm sure the sheriff loves paperwork. Maris forced a small smile. No, she lied. It's just family. The loan officer nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. Paperwork took time.
Signatures.
Forms. Warnings about interest and repayment schedules. Maris signed anyway. Each signature felt like a small funeral. When the teller finally handed her the envelope of cash, Maris's fingers shook so badly she almost dropped it. She walked out into the sunlight and sat in her car for a minute, staring at the steering wheel. Her chest hurt again, harder this time. A sharp squeezing that made her gasp. Her vision narrowed at the edges. Maris squeezed her eyes shut and breathed. Not now, she begged her body. Not now. After a long moment, the pain eased slightly. She wiped sweat from her lip with the back of her hand and started the car. She drove home with that envelope in her purse like it was a bomb. Because it was. It wasn't salvation. It was a delay. But delays were what mothers bought when they ran out of miracles. Maris turned onto the highway back toward Bayou La Batterie, hands tight on the wheel, mind racing through the next steps. Get home.
Give Cade the cash. Make Cade call Wade Calder. Make Wade go away.
Then figure out what came next. Work more shifts. Take on night cleaning again. Anything. She glanced at the dashboard clock. Time moved like a predator. As she approached an intersection where the road widened, Maris saw a semi-truck in the distance, big rig hauling something heavy, moving fast. The light ahead shifted. Yellow. Then red.
Maris pressed the brake.
Her foot slipped for half a second, just a half second, because sweat made her sandal slick. She corrected, pressed again, harder. The car slowed. Not enough. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Her chest tightened again, sharp and dizzying. Maris tried to steer into the shoulder, but the lane felt suddenly too narrow, the world too bright, the air too thick. She heard a horn long blaring, angry, then everything turned into sound and motion and light.
A violent jolt. A crash of metal.
The car spun.
Maris's hands flew off the wheel.
Her head snapped sideways. Her vision went white around the edges. For one suspended, impossible moment, her mind wasn't on loans or threats or gambling. It was on Eloan's face. It was on Cade as a little boy humming over a broken keyboard. It was on Judson's note, keep it safe. Then the world slammed shut. Back at the trailer, Cade paced the living room like a caged animal, phone in hand, calling Maris again and again. No answer. Eloan sat on the couch hugging her knees, eyes red. She's just busy, Eloan whispered, trying to convince herself more than Cade. Cade's voice came out strained. She would answer. The phone finally rang.
Cade snatched it up. Mama.
A stranger's voice answered. Is this Cade Mercer? Cade's blood turned to ice. Who is this? This is Officer Harlan with Alabama Highway Patrol, the voice said, professional and careful, the voice of someone who had delivered bad news before and hated it every time. So there's been an accident involving a vehicle registered to Maris Duval. Cade couldn't breathe.
Eloan's eyes widened, terror blooming.
Kat.
Cade's voice cracked.
Is she okay? There was a pause, too long, too heavy. We're transporting her to Providence Hospital in Mobile, the officer said. You need to get there as soon as you can. Cade's knees went weak. He grabbed the back of a chair to keep himself standing. Eloan stood so fast she nearly fell. No, she whispered.
No, no.
Cade's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His brain refused to accept it. The officer continued, tone urgent.
Sir? Do you understand me? Cade finally managed a broken whisper.
Yes. He hung up. The trailer felt suddenly silent in the worst way, like even the air was holding its breath. Eloan stared at him, shaking.
What happened?
Cade looked at his sister, then toward the door, then down at his own bruised hands like he was seeing them for the first time. And in his head, Wade Calder's calm voice replayed like a curse. Don't make us visit her. Cade swallowed hard, eyes filling with horror. Because in that moment, standing in the cheap light of their living room, Cade Mercer understood something that split his life in two. His mother hadn't just been trying to save him. She'd been racing the wolves he brought to her porch. And now she might be paying the price. The first thing Cade noticed at Providence Hospital wasn't the smell of antiseptic or the bright, merciless lights. It was the sound. Not screaming, thank God, but the steady, relentless noise of a place that never stopped. Intercom chimes, shoe soles squeaking on tile, distant monitors beeping in a rhythm that made Cade's heartbeat feel wrong, like it was trying to match the machines and failing. Eloan clutched his sleeve so hard her fingers hurt. She didn't cry loudly. She didn't fall apart the way Cade expected. She just stared forward with a face too blank for a 17-year-old, as if her brain had decided emotion was a luxury they couldn't afford. Cade kept telling himself one sentence on repeat, like it was a prayer he could force into becoming true. She's alive. She's alive. She's alive. A nurse at the desk asked for their names. Cade answered too fast. Eloan answered too quiet. The nurse's eyes softened the way people's eyes soften when they've seen too many families arrive at this exact edge of the world. Maris Duval? The nurse confirmed, reading from a clipboard. Cade nodded so hard it made his neck hurt. We're still evaluating her, the nurse said.
If you'll wait. Wait.
Cade heard himself snap. The word came out sharp, ugly.
We can't. She.
Eloan squeezed his arm, a silent plea. Don't make this worse. Cade swallowed the rage, the panic, the guilt that burned like acid.
Sorry, he forced out. Just please. Tell us anything.
The nurse gave a small nod.
A doctor will speak with you soon.
Soon meant 15 minutes that felt like a lifetime. Cade paced the waiting area like an animal searching for an exit that didn't exist. Eloan sat with her knees pulled to her chest, staring at the floor. Every few seconds she looked up as if expecting their mother to walk around the corner with that exhausted half-smile, scolding them for making a fuss. Dash arrived breathless, hair messy, eyes wide with fear he tried to hide behind anger.
What happened? Dash demanded, stepping into Cade's space.
Cade couldn't meet his eyes.
Car wreck.
Dash stared at him harder. Why was she driving into Mobile at sunrise? Cade's throat tightened. He could taste the lie he'd been living, metallic, bitter. To handle stuff, he muttered.
Bills.
Dash looked like he wanted to shout, then stopped when he saw Eloan's face.
His voice dropped. How bad?
Cade's mouth opened.
Nothing came out.
Dash's jaw tightened. He sat beside Eloan and, after a moment of hesitation, put an arm around her shoulders like he'd done it 1,000 times, like she was his sister too. Eloan didn't lean into him. But she didn't pull away either. When the doctor finally appeared, Cade recognized him immediately as the kind of man who delivered terrible news for a living. Not because he looked cruel, didn't. He looked tired in a way that made Cade's stomach drop. The doctor introduced himself as Dr. Narayan and guided them into a small consultation room where the walls were too clean and the chairs were bolted to the floor like the building didn't trust anyone to leave.
Doctor.
Narayan folded his hands. Your mother has multiple injuries, he began, careful and precise. She has internal trauma. A head injury. We've stabilized her, but she's in critical condition. Eloan made a small sound, like a breath that broke. Cade heard his own voice hoarse. Is she gonna die? The doctor didn't answer immediately. That pause just a few seconds was worse than a yes. "We're doing everything we can, Dr. Narayan said. "She's currently in the ICU. She's sedated. We'll monitor her closely over the next several hours." Cade gripped the edge of the chair until his fingers went numb. "Can we see her?" "Yes," the doctor said gently. "One at a time, for a few minutes. She's connected to several devices. Try not to."
Cade stood too fast.
"I don't care. I just need to see her." The ICU was colder than Cade expected. The air felt sharpened, like it had edges. Maris lay in a hospital bed surrounded by soft hissing machines and quiet blinking lights. Her face was paler than Cade had ever seen it, her hair messy against the pillow like she'd been caught in the middle of a life she didn't have time to finish. Cade had pictured his mother as unbreakable for so long that seeing her like this felt unreal. Like the universe had made a mistake. He moved closer, careful, afraid even his breath might hurt her. "Mama," he whispered. Her eyelids didn't move. The monitor kept beeping with indifferent patience. Cade reached for her hand. It was warm but limp, not gripping back the way her hands used to grip his when he was little and scared of thunder. Cade's chest squeezed so hard he thought he might throw up. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice shaking. "I'm so sorry." He wasn't sure who he was apologizing to anymore, Maris, Eloan, God himself. Maybe all of them. He leaned closer, tears blurring his vision. "I didn't mean to bring this to you. I didn't mean." The door opened softly behind him. A nurse gave him a gentle look.
"Sir."
"Time." Cade wanted to refuse. To plant himself beside the bed and become part of the furniture. But the nurse's eyes weren't cold, they were kind, and Cade suddenly realized kindness in a place like this had to be protected. He nodded, swallowed hard, and let go of Maris's hand like it was the hardest thing he'd ever done. As he stepped away, he glanced at the machines and felt the most terrifying thought bloom in his mind. What if she wakes up and I'm not here? He walked out into the hallway and nearly collided with Eloan, who rushed in with a face so tight it looked like it might crack. Cade began. She brushed past him without a word. And that silence hurt more than yelling.
Dash stood waiting, arms crossed, eyes sharp.
"We need to talk," he said low. Cade's stomach dropped. "Not now." Dash's voice hardened. "Yeah. Now." Cade followed him into a corner of the waiting area where Eloan couldn't hear. Dash's gaze pinned him. "Those men last night," he said. "I saw the way you looked. Cade, what did you do?" Cade tried to lie. His mouth opened.
Nothing came out. Dash exhaled, angry and scared all at once.
"You got your mom wrapped up in something, didn't you?"
Cade's voice cracked.
"I didn't want it to be like this." Dash's expression changed, less anger, more disbelief.
"Tell me the truth."
Cade stared at the floor until it felt like the tiles might swallow him. Then, in a voice so quiet it didn't feel like his own, he said, "I owe money." Dash went still. "To who?" Cade's eyes lifted, haunted.
"Wade Calder."
Dash's face tightened like he'd heard the name before. "Lone Shark," Dash muttered.
"And Kellan Rourke."
Cade flinched. Dash cursed under his breath.
"Cut." Cade's hands shook.
"I thought I could fix it. I thought I could get money fast. For Mama. For her health. For Ellie." Dash stared at him like he wanted to hit him and hug him in the same breath. "You don't fix drowning by tying cinder blocks to your feet," he hissed. Cade swallowed. "I know." Dash's voice dropped. "How much?" Cade told him. Dash's eyes widened. "That's not a debt," he whispered. That's a trap. Cade nodded once, miserable. They came to the trailer. Dash's jaw tightened.
EM calling the police.
Cade grabbed his arm, panic surging.
No, don't.
Wade said. Dash yanked his arm back. Wade can say whatever he wants.
This is crime.
Cade's voice was desperate. If they know we talkative, they think I'm snitching. Dash leaned close, voice like steel. Your mom is in ICU, he said quietly. You think you can afford to keep playing scared? That sentence hit Cade so hard it stole his breath. Because Dash was right. Cade had been living in fear like it was safer than action. But fear didn't protect Maris.
Fear hadn't protected anyone. Cade's hands curled into fists.
What do we do? Dash's eyes flicked toward the ICU doors where Eloan had disappeared. We protect Ellie, he said. And we end this. 2 hours later, Eloan came out of the ICU with a face that looked older than Cade's. She squeezed my hand, Eloan whispered, voice trembling. Like she knew I was there. Cade's throat tightened. That's good, he said quickly, clinging to any scrap of hope. That she's strong. Eloan's eyes snapped to him, suddenly sharp. Strong doesn't mean invincible, she said. What did you do to her? Cade flinched. Dash stepped in gently. Ellie, not right now. No, Eloan snapped, surprising both of them. Her voice shook with grief and fury. Right now.
I heard last night.
I heard him. I heard those men say her name like it was theirs to say. Cade's chest burned. He couldn't breathe around the shame. Eloan, he started, voice breaking, I didn't.
Stop, she whispered, tears spilling now.
Just stop. Cade's eyes filled too, but he didn't wipe them away. He didn't deserve to hide. I was trying to get money, he admitted. For Mama. When you called when you said she needed help I panicked.
Eloan's face twisted.
So you gambled? Cade nodded once. Yes. Eloan's voice came out thin, devastated. Mama took a loan for you. Cade froze. What? Eloan's hands shook as she wiped her face. I saw her paperwork once, she said. She didn't tell you. She didn't tell me. But I saw it. She was trying to protect us. Cade's vision went blurry.
Eloan's voice shattered.
And then she drove to Mobile this morning because of you. Because of debt.
Because of fear.
Because she couldn't stand the idea of wolves coming to her door again. Cade's knees went weak. He grabbed the chair behind him and sat hard. Dash looked between them, anger returning. That loan money, Dash said slowly. Where is it? Eloan swallowed. She had it in her purse. I saw the envelope when she left.
Cade's blood ran cold.
Because if Maris had taken out that loan to pay Wade, then Maris had been carrying a target in her purse the moment she hit the highway. Cade heard Wade's calm voice in his head like a curse.
Don't make me return.
Cade stood abruptly. I need to call the trooper. Dash's eyes widened.
Now you rethinking. Cade's voice shook.
What if they followed her? Dash's expression hardened. Then we make sure someone pays for it. Alabama Highway Patrol took Cade's statement with the slow, careful patience of people who had heard 1,000 families insist there was more to the story. But when Cade said the name Wade Calder, the trooper's face changed, subtle but real. Where do you know him from? The trooper asked. Penn paused.
Cade's mouth tasted like ash.
Debt. The trooper's gaze sharpened. Illegal gambling? Cade hesitated then nodded. Yes. Dash squeezed Cade's shoulder like he was holding him up. The trooper exhaled, then stood. I'm going to bring in an investigator, he said. You'll need to repeat your statement. And you'll need to be honest. Cade nodded, throat tight. I will. That promise was terrifying. Because honesty now wasn't a confession. It was a match thrown into a room full of gasoline. Late that afternoon, Dr. Narayan returned. Cade recognized him before he spoke, recognized the weight in his posture, the careful gentleness in his eyes. Cade stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. Eloan's fingers dug into Dash's arm. Doctor. Narayan's voice was soft. I'm sorry, he said. We had a sudden complication. We tried to stabilize her, but her injuries were too severe. Eloan made a sound Cade would never forget, like something inside her had cracked open. Cade stared at the doctor, waiting for the words to rearrange themselves into something else. But they didn't. No. Cade whispered. No, please. Doctor. Narayan shook his head slowly. You can go in, he said. Say goodbye. Cade didn't know how his body moved, but suddenly he was walking, dragging air into lungs that didn't want it. Dash guided Eloan like she might collapse. Maris lay in the bed the same way she had earlier, but now the room felt different, quiet in a way that wasn't medical anymore. Cade approached her slowly. Mama, he whispered, voice breaking. Hey. He waited, childish, impossible hope for her chest to rise. It didn't. Eloan stepped forward and laid her forehead against Maris's hand, sobbing. Cade stood at the foot of the bed, unable to touch her at first, like his guilt made him unworthy of contact. Then he remembered all the times Maris had touched him when he didn't deserve it. All the times she'd fed him when he'd slammed doors. All the times she'd worked herself sick so he could pretend life might be bigger than the bay. Cade reached out and took her hand. It was colder now. Not ice cold. Just wrong. Cade's tears fell silently onto the blanket. I'm sorry, he whispered again. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. His voice cracked into a sob he couldn't hold back. I thought I could make us okay, he cried, trembling. I thought I could fix it fast and you wouldn't have to carry it anymore. I didn't mean. He couldn't finish. Because the truth was too sharp to say out loud. I brought this to you. Dash stood behind him, jaw clenched, eyes wet. Eloan's hands shook as she gripped Maris's fingers. Mama, she sobbed. Please, please. Maris didn't answer. And Cade realized the most brutal lesson of adulthood. Some apologies arrive after the door has already closed. The funeral was small, because Maris had lived modestly. But the line of people who came through was long, because Maris had lived kindly. Neighbors from the docks. Women who sold at the seafood stand. Men who nodded at Cade with sympathy that felt like knives. A few church ladies who hugged Eloan so tight she looked like she might vanish into their arms. Cade stood in a black shirt that didn't fit right, staring at the casket like it might open and reveal this was all a mistake. He heard whispers, not cruel, mostly, but curious. She worked too hard. Poor Maris. Hope them kids gonna be okay. Cade felt like everyone's eyes could see the debt tattooed on his skin. Wade didn't show up. But Cade kept looking for him anyway, because fear didn't stop just because grief started. After the service, Eloan went quiet again. Not numb-focused. Cade, she said later that night in the trailer, voice steady in a way that scared him, tell me something. Cade looked up, exhausted. Anything. Eloan's eyes were red but dry. Are you going to let them do this to us again? Cade's throat tightened. No. Eloan stared at him like she needed to see if he meant it. Then stop hiding, she whispered. Cade nodded once. Okay. That night, Cade called the investigator back. He gave them everything. Not details of how to run a game, nothing like that, but names, places, times, messages, numbers. The address behind the billiards hall.
Kellen Rourke, SK description.
Wade's phone number. The exact words Wade had said on Maris's porch. And then Cade did the hardest thing he'd done since Maris died. He agreed to help them catch Wade. 2 days later, Cade sat in a parked car with a wired microphone clipped under his collar. His hands shook so badly he had to press them between his knees to keep them from rattling. Dash sat beside him, face tight with fury. "You sure about this?" Dash asked. Cade looked out through the windshield at the dim parking lot of a closed auto parts store where Wade had agreed to meet.
"No," Cade whispered.
"But I'm done being a coward."
A Detective Merrick Sloan leaned through the window from the other side, eyes sharp.
"Keep it simple," he said. "Don't provoke him. Don't try to be a hero. We're right here." Cade swallowed. "If he figures it out." "He won't," the detective said. "And if he does, we move fast." Cade nodded, but his heartbeat didn't slow. Because Wade Calder didn't feel like someone you could outsmart. He felt like someone you survived.
Headlights swung into the lot.
A dark sedan rolled in and stopped 3 spaces away. Wade stepped out like this was a casual meeting between businessmen. No hurry. No nerves.
Calm eyes scanning the lot.
He saw Cade and smiled faintly.
"Cade Mercer," Wade called.
"You look like you've had a rough week." Cade's stomach twisted, but he forced himself to walk forward. Wade's gaze flicked over Cade's face, noting the exhaustion, the grief, the hollow. "Where's your mama?" Wade asked softly, and the question landed like a slap.
Cade's vision blurred with rage.
But he remembered Detective Sloan's words.
"Keep it simple."
Cade swallowed the scream in his throat. "She's gone," he said, voice shaking.
"She died."
Wade's expression barely changed, just a faint tightening around his eyes, like the information was mildly inconvenient. "Sorry to hear that," Wade said, not sounding sorry at all. "Death doesn't erase debt." Cade's hands curled into fists so hard his nails bit his palms. "I have money," Cade lied, forcing his voice steady. "Not all of it. But something." Wade tilted his head. "From where?" Cade's throat tightened. "Insurance. Help. Whatever." Wade took one slow step closer. "Show me." Cade reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, cash he'd scraped together with Dash's help, enough to look real but not enough to satisfy Wade. Wade took it, counted quickly, then smiled in that calm way that made Cade want to vomit. "This is effort," Wade said. "Not payment." Cade forced himself to keep breathing. "It's what I have." Wade leaned close, voice low. "No," he murmured.
"It's what you willing to hand me."
"Those are different things."
Cade's jaw trembled. "What do you want?"
Wade's eyes were cold. "I want you to stop making me come to your home.
I want you to stop making me look for you.
I want you to do what you agreed to do."
Cade's voice cracked.
"I agreed because you threatened my mother."
Wade's smile faded.
"Careful," he warned. "Grief makes people talk too much." Cade felt the wire under his shirt like a heartbeat of its own. He swallowed hard.
"Kellen dragged me into this," Cade said, pushing the conversation, keeping it just on the edge.
"He said it'd be one night." "He said." Wade's eyes narrowed slightly. "Kellen talks too much," he said. Cade's throat went dry.
"Did you follow my mother?"
For the first time, Wade's calm cracked just a hairline fracture.
Watch your mouth, Wade said softly.
Cade's heart pounded so loud he thought it would be picked up by the microphone. Wade stepped closer, voice dropping. You're about to become a problem, Cade. And in that moment, Cade knew, Wade hadn't come here to negotiate. He'd come to control.
Wade's gaze moved past Cade toward the shadows of the lot.
Too aware. Too careful. Detective Sloane's voice hissed in Cade's earpiece. He's clocking something. Stay calm. Wade lifted his chin slightly, like he'd made a decision. You're coming with me, Wade said.
We'll talk somewhere quieter. Cade's blood froze. No.
Wade's hand shifted toward his waistband, not pulling anything obvious, just the gesture of someone reminding you he could. Yes, he said, voice still calm. Now. Cade's fear surged, but behind fear was something hotter. Maris's face.
Eloan sob. The porch knock.
Cade took one step back and said the words that detonated the moment. My mom died because of this. Wade's eyes went flat. She died because she got in the way, he said, and that sentence gold, casual, was all the police needed. The lot erupted. Unmarked cars surged in from both sides.
Blue lights flashed.
Voices shouted. Wade spun, startled, and for the first time Cade saw real fear flicker across his face. Then hands were on Wade. He struggled, but the calm was gone. The mask had slipped. Detective Sloane grabbed Wade's arm, twisting it behind his back. Wade Calder, you're under arrest, he barked. Wade's head snapped toward Cade, eyes blazing. You stupid, he began. Cade stood frozen, shaking, as Wade was shoved into the back of a cruiser. Dash appeared beside Cade, gripping his shoulder hard. You did it, Dash said, voice rough. Cade didn't feel victory. He felt emptiness. Because Maris wasn't coming back. The investigation moved fast after that. Not magically fast, nothing in real life is magic, but fast enough that Cade realized Wade wasn't a lone wolf. He was part of a pack. Illegal gambling. Loan sharking. Threats. Extortion. People trapped in debts, designed to never end. Kellen Rourke tried to disappear. But phones leave trails. Messages leave trails.
Money leaves trails.
When police finally brought Kellen in, Cade didn't even recognize him at first.
The swagger was gone. The smile was gone.
Kellen looked like a man who'd spent his whole life leaning on other people's fear and suddenly realized fear had teeth. Kellen glanced at Cade in the station hallway and sneered.
Look at you, Kellen muttered.
Finally growing a spine. Cade stared at him, calm in a way he hadn't been in months.
My mother's dead, Cade said. Kellen's eyes flickered annoyance, not remorse.
Not my fault, she.
Cade stepped closer, voice low.
Don't, he warned. You don't get to speak about her. Kellen's jaw clenched, and for a moment Cade saw it clearly. Kellen had never been a friend. He'd been a door into hell with a friendly face. The debt didn't vanish overnight. But with Wade in custody, the threats stopped. The knocks stopped. The sense of being hunted began to fade, slowly, like a bruise healing. Still, life didn't suddenly become easy. Maris's loan paperwork came in the mail like a cruel joke, statements, interest, deadlines, the cold language of money that didn't care who lived or died. Eloan stared at it at the kitchen table, face pale. If we can't pay, they'll take the back lot, she whispered. Cade's throat tightened. Judson's note, keep it safe, might as well have been carved into Cade's bones now. I won't let that happen, Cade said. Eloan's eyes were sharp, exhausted. How? Cade looked down at his hands, the same hands that had pushed chips across a table like a fool. The same hands that now had to become useful in a different way. "I'll work," Cade said simply.
"Anything." Eloan's mouth trembled. "You already work."
"Then I'll work more." Dash leaned against the doorframe, watching them both. "You're not doing it alone," he said.
Cade shook his head.
Dash. Dash cut him off. "Cade," he said, voice firm, "your mom spent her whole life not doing it alone. People helped her. Even when she didn't want to ask. Let people help you now."
Cade's eyes stung.
He nodded once. "Okay." Cade sold what little he had. Not dramatic things, not heartbreak movie sacrifices, just the small pieces of comfort he'd been clinging to.
Electronics. A guitar pedal.
His old keyboard. Anything that could turn into a payment. He picked up shifts at the docks, dirty, exhausting work that left his hands raw. He cleaned floors at night in a dentist's office in Mobile. He delivered food on weekends until his car started making noises that sounded like complaints. He slept in scraps. He stopped drinking. Stopped pretending he could afford distractions. When grief hit, he didn't run from it into quick money. He let it burn through him like fever. And slowly, inch by inch, the numbers began to move in the right direction. A few months later, Detective Sloan called Cade with news. The case against Wade and several others was moving forward. Cade would likely need to testify. Cade's stomach knotted. "I'll do it." Sloan's voice softened. "I know it's hard," he said. "But you did the right thing." Cade stared at the trailer wall where Maris's old calendar still hung, months out of date. "It doesn't feel like it," Cade whispered. "It rarely does," Sloan replied. "But it matters." A year passed. Then another. Eloan graduated high school with honors, and when she walked across that stage, Cade swore he felt Maris in the air, like the whole room had been stitched together by her effort. Eloan didn't go to some faraway, glamorous school. She chose a solid program close enough that she could come home when the missing ache got too big. She studied like her life depended on it, because in a way, it did. And Cade built something small and steady.
Not a miracle. A business.
A copy and print shop near a community college, the kind of place students always needed papers, resumes, flyers, last-minute projects. The kind of business that didn't promise fast riches, just slow survival. He kept the shop clean. He kept his prices fair. He remembered what it felt like to be broke and terrified. Dash helped with the setup. A retired neighbor helped Cade find a cheap lease. People showed up not because Cade deserved it, but because Maris had spent her life being the kind of person people wanted to honor. Every time Cade unlocked the shop in the morning, he thought of Maris unlocking the seafood stand with hands cracked from salt and work. And he kept going. One rainy afternoon years later, Cade sat in his shop watching water slide down the window like the world was crying quietly. The news played on a small TV in the corner, volume low. A reporter spoke over footage of men being led in handcuffs. Federal agents announced indictments today connected to a multi-state fraud and illegal gambling operation.
Cade's breath caught.
Because for a split second on the screen, he saw a familiar face, older, thinner, eyes harder.
Kellen Roark.
Cade stared until the reporter moved on.
No satisfaction came.
No triumph. Just a strange, heavy stillness. Because Kellen's downfall didn't resurrect Maris. It didn't erase the last look Eloan had on the porch. It didn't undo the way Cade had learned too late what love costs when you gamble with it. Cade turned off the TV. He locked up early. Then he drove out to the cemetery as rain softened the world into gray. Maris's headstone was simple. Cade knelt in the damp grass, rain soaking his jeans, and set a bouquet down wildflowers and a small sprig of rosemary because Maris used to say rosemary was for remembrance. He sat there a long time without speaking. Then finally Cade whispered, "I kept it." His voice trembled. "I kept the back lot, Mama. I didn't let it go. Ellie's still got it." Rain dripped off his lashes like tears he didn't have to hide. "I wanted to tell you sooner," he murmured. "I wanted to fix it faster. But I did it the way you always did, slow. Honest. Tired.
One day at a time."
He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry it took losing you for me to learn." The wind moved through the trees with a soft hush that sounded almost like a breath. Cade's throat tightened. "I miss you," he whispered. "Every day." He pressed his palm to the wet stone. Then he said the words he wished he'd said while she was alive, when they still could have landed somewhere warm. "Thank you. For the life she carried. For the love she gave. For the way she kept standing even when she was exhausted." Cade stayed until the rain eased. When he finally stood, his legs stiff, his chest heavy, he looked up at the gray sky and felt something quiet settle inside him, not peace exactly, but purpose. Maris hadn't died so Cade could drown again. She died in the middle of trying to save her children from the wolves. So Cade turned away from the grave and walked back to his car.
Back to the shop.
Back to Eloan's future. Back to the life he had to build, slow and honest, because it was the only way left to honor the mother he couldn't bring back. And as he drove, Cade made himself one promise, carved deep enough that even fear couldn't erase it.
No more fast money.
No more lies.
No more wolves at the door.